I stood in my wedding dress, holding my bouquet, 5 minutes from walking down the aisle, and I couldn't stop shaking. Not from nerves, but from rage. My mother had just confessed something behind the church organ in a whisper aisle. Never forget, he came to me last night, said he needed comfort. She smiled like she'd done me a favor. And my fiancé. He wouldn't even meet my eyes, so I walked down that aisle anyway, but not to marry him. What I did next made the entire church go silent. My mother always said I was born with a checklist in my hand. I color-coded my homework in 3rd grade, alphabetized our pantry in middle school, and graduated top of my class while juggling 2 part-time jobs. I didn't drink, didn't date, didn't disappoint. Key called me her little miracle, but I think what she really meant was my perfect project. Key, we were close. At least that's what it looked like. Sunday breakfasts, shopping trips, phone calls every evening, like clockwork. But even as a child, I noticed how tightly she held the leash. If I wanted bangs, she convinced me they'd make me look childish. When I got into a university 2 hours away, she wept until I chose the one 15 minutes from home. And whenever I did exactly as she wanted, she'd beam and say, "That's my girl. Just like I raised you." It never felt like love. It's more like control wrapped in soft pink ribbon. So when I met Ryan, it felt like stepping into sunlight after living in a shadow. We bumped into each other at a corporate leadership conference, literally. Spilled hot coffee on his notepad, and he laughed like it was the highlight of his day. He was charming in a quiet way, confident, without the ego, and best of all, he listened. Really listened. After a few months of late-night texts and shared Uber rides, he asked me to dinner, and I surprised myself by saying yes. I didn't tell my mother at first. It felt like introducing a butterfly to a flame. But eventually I had to dot. Her reaction was polite, at best. She smiled too tightly, asked too many questions about his family, his finances, his intentions. "Sounds nice," she said, drawing out the word like she was choking on it. "Just be careful, sweetheart. Men can be very good at pretending." I brushed it off. She always acted that way. Every friend I'd ever had, male or female, was a distraction. She believed my future didn't have room for detours, especially romantic ones. But Ryan didn't fit into any of her boxes. And I think that's what unsettled her most. Wasn't flashy, came from a small town, was raised by a school teacher and a mechanic, and didn't care much for fancy dinners or designer labels. He valued time over money, effort over appearance. My mother, who believed success was tailored and worn like armor, called him unrefined after their first meeting. He didn't even bring flowers. She whispered to me in the kitchen while Ryan was in the living room chatting with my aunt. Men used to court women. Now they just show up. But I saw the way Ryan looked at me like I was the only person in the room. He remembered the tiny things that I liked, my tea lukewarm, that I slept with my hair tied up, that I cried. Watching documentaries about elderly couples. With him, I felt seen. And slowly that started to matter more than being approved. Our relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, he'd met my friends, my cousins, even my coworkers. They loved him, said he brought out something softer in me, something brighter. I smiled more. I stopped checking my emails during dinner, but with my mother, things grew. Colder by the day, she stopped asking about him altogether, and when I brought him up, she'd change the subject or make a face like she'd just tasted sour milk. Still, I tried to bridge the gap. I invited her to lunch with us. I showed her the necklace Ryan gave me for my birthday, a delicate gold pendant with a tiny compass. 'Cause, he said, I always helped him find his way. She said it's cute, then launched into a story about how my father once bought her a sapphire ring from Paris. And when Ryan told her he wanted to propose, asking for her blessing in the old-fashioned way, she didn't say no. She said, "Why rush?" I didn't hear about that conversation until much later. At the time, I thought things were finally smoothing out. She agreed to help with wedding planning, picked out venues with me, even offered to host a bridal brunch. She smiled. In photos, played the role of doting mother, but sometimes I'd catch her watching us when she thought no one was looking. Her smile would slip, her eyes would narrow just slightly, like she was calculating something, like she saw me not as her daughter, but as competition, and deep down a small voice whispered something I wasn't ready to hear. She doesn't want to share you. She doesn't want to lose control. She's not protecting you from him. She's protecting something of her own. But I pushed that voice down because my mother loved me, didn't she? And Ryan would never betray me, right? The first time a vendor canceled on us, I thought it was bad luck. The second time, I blamed miscommunication. By the third, I started to wonder if I was the problem. I confirmed the florist weeks ago. "Okay," told Ryan, scrolling through my inbox again. "She swears I never called back." He glanced up from the couch, a gentle crease between his brows. "Did you maybe delete the email by mistake?" I wanted to believe that. I really did, but I'd never been careless about details. If anything, I overplanned. That's what made it so frustrating when little things kept going wrong. The bakery got our date wrong. The seamstress forgot my final fitting. The band said my mom had called and rescheduled the rehearsal dinner without asking me. I asked her about that last one. She just smiled and said, "You're so stressed, sweetheart. Let me handle a few things. You'll thank me." At first, I tried to let it go. She said she was helping, and maybe she thought she was. But her help always felt like interference, quiet and calculated. And Ryan was starting to notice. "I feel like she's everywhere," he said one night after we'd come home from a cake tasting. She'd crashed uninvited. She called me yesterday asking what kind of socks I'm wearing for the ceremony. I laughed. Then I didn't, because he wasn't joking that weekend. I opened my laptop to update the seating chart and found the file gone. Just ... gone. I stared at the empty folder, my pulse quickening. "Mom, did you change anything on my Google Drive?" I asked when she dropped off a tray of lasagna that Monday. She didn't miss a beat. "Oh, honey, I tried to help with the layout, but I couldn't figure out your login, so I gave up." "Okay, maybe your account glitched." Her voice was soft, reassuring. It's the kind of voice that would lull most people into trust. But for the first time in my life, I felt unsettled by it. Later that night, was searching through an old drawer for my passport when I found it, a dusty album shoved behind a stack of tax papers and manuals. It wasn't mine. It had a cracked red leather cover and gold lettering that read Spring '92. Curious. I sat on the floor and flipped it open. The first photo was of my mother, younger, radiant, and unmistakably her. Oh, she was on a beach, holding hands with a man who looked hauntingly familiar. Dark brown hair, strong jawline, that same dimple on his left cheek when he smiled. I flipped to the next page. He was kissing her cheek. She was laughing, her face turned toward the camera, his tucked into her neck. They looked like a couple in love, maybe even in hiding. My chest tightened. I turned another page. There was a photo of the two of them standing in front of an old green truck. On the bumper was a faded sticker, Southwick Auto and Tire. Ryan's dad owned a place called Southwick Auto. He'd mentioned it once when we visited his hometown. I closed the album slowly, my hands trembling. It couldn't be. That man couldn't be Ryan's dad. Could he? I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows stretching across the room like fingers. I kept asking myself why she never liked Ryan, why she tried to push him away. And when that didn't work, began pulling everything apart one thread at a time. Then, next morning, I tried to bring it up casually over tea. "Mom, did you ever know someone named James Southwick?" Her spoon paused mid-stir. Then she gave a light laugh. "Oh, that name takes me back. I dated him for a summer." "Why?" I swallowed hard. "Did you ever keep in touch?" She sipped her tea and shrugged. "Not really." Life moves on, sweetheart. Why this sudden curiosity? I lied. Said I saw the name on a flyer in town. She didn't press, but her smile never quite reached her eyes after that dot from then on. I noticed how she looked at Ryan when he wasn't watching. Not with suspicion, but with something murkier, like recognition laced with resentment. Or, longing. Once, I caught her straightening his tie when I came back from the bathroom. Her hand lingered on his chest a moment too long. When she saw me, she pulled away like nothing had happened. My skin crawled. But whenever I tried to talk to Ryan about it, he brushed it off. "She probably just misses having you all to herself," he said. "You've always been her world." That was the problem. I was never allowed to be just me. I had to be her, or worse, hers. And the more I saw her watching Ryan, the more I realized maybe she wasn't just mourning the loss of her daughter. Maybe she was mourning the man she couldn't keep, or the life she almost had. And saw me living now. I didn't know it then. But that photo album was more than a memory. It was a warning. The night before the wedding felt like standing on the edge of something sacred. I sat on my childhood bed, my veil still sealed in its clear box, on the vanity, and stared at the blinking cursor on my phone screen. Last seen, 9:47 p.m. Ryan still hadn't responded to my "good night, I love you" text. He was never like this, not even once. We'd spent months buried in color palettes and guest lists. Late night stress laughs and quiet, "we're really doing this" moments. Through every chaotic second of planning, he was steady, present. Mine. So why, the night before everything we'd built came together, had he gone radio silent? I dialed once, no answer. Twice, straight to voicemail. The pit in my stomach churned. Just as I was about to call again, I heard a knock at my door. My mom peeked in, wearing her silk robe, a faint trace of lipstick still clinging to her smile. "Can't sleep?" she asked, stepping in without waiting for a yes. I shook my head, eyes still glued to the phone. She sat beside me. Her perfume, musky, floral, familiar, drifting over like fog. "Don't worry about Ryan," he told me. He was grabbing a drink with some of his groomsmen. It's probably one last hurrah. Boys will be boys. I turned toward her. "He told you that?" She smoothed my hair with the back of her fingers, like she used to when I was little. "Of course, sweetheart. He stopped by earlier to drop off a small gift for you. Said he didn't want to ruin the surprise, but asked if I'd keep it safe. Until tomorrow." I blinked, confused. "He was here. MMH. She smiled a little too slowly, but only for a minute. Just popped in and left again. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, too clean, too convenient. But I forced myself to nod, even smile. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was just nervous. She kissed my forehead, whispered sweet dreams, and walked out. But I couldn't sleep, not even when. I tucked my phone under my pillow like a talisman. Not even when. I closed my eyes and tried to picture him standing at the altar tomorrow, just past midnight. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water, and that's when I saw it. Ryan's car, parked at the end of the driveway, headlights off, engine silent. I froze behind the curtains, heart pounding like a drum. The street was empty, the night heavy and still. His car hadn't been there when I came home from the rehearsal dinner. I was sure of it. I waited. 5 minutes, 10. No movement. I almost ran outside barefoot. Almost knocked on the driver's side window like a woman possessed. But something stopped me instead. I crept upstairs past my mother's room. The door cracked slightly open. Her light was off. But I could hear soft rustling inside. And a faint sound, not a voice exactly, a murmur, a whisper too quiet to catch. I stood there for a moment, listening. The air felt thick, like something unspoken had taken shape in the shadows. Then I turned back to my room. I didn't sleep. I barely breathed when dawn broke. It felt like it split something inside me. I showered in silence, dressed in silence. Painted on the makeup I'd carefully chosen for my perfect day, like it was armor. I didn't even check my phone downstairs. My mom was already up, standing at the kitchen island with a teacup in hand, dressed immaculately in pale blue. Her hair was freshly curled. Her lipstick was new. She looked like the mother of the bride, poised, glowing, proud. "You look stunning," she said, eyes sweeping over me like a prize. I managed a nod. "Thanks." Then I asked casually, like the question didn't tremble in my throat, "Did Ryan ever text you back?" Her hand paused around her cup just for a second. Then the smile, smooth, polished, cold. "He didn't need to." "What's that supposed to mean?" She tilted her head. "You're so tense, darling. Don't let anxiety ruin your moment." I stared at her. I wanted to scream. To ask why his car had been outside last night? To ask what she meant and what? She wasn't saying, but all I said was, "I'll wait in the car." The drive to the church felt like moving through fog. People buzzed around me, photographers, florists, relatives offering hugs, but none of it touched me. It was all background noise, a distant echo of the day I used to dream about. Just before the ceremony, I stepped outside for air, behind the church. By the stone organ room, the morning was still and quiet. That's where she found me. She stepped out in her heels, holding my bouquet, and said, "I wanted to see you before you walked down. One more moment. It's just us." I didn't answer. I couldn't even look at her then. She exhaled, soft, almost like a sigh. "He came to me last night," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Said he needed comfort. He was nervous, scared. I didn't push him away." Turned slowly. She wasn't even ashamed. Her expression wasn't regretful. It was triumphant. Like she'd finally taken back something that had always belonged to her. "I didn't mean to," she added gently. "But you should know, sweetheart, it wasn't just him. I felt it for a long time. You brought him into our lives, and I saw what you didn't." My throat went dry. My hands clenched around the lace in my dress. "Why?" I asked, voice cracking. "Why would you do this to me?" She looked at me, eyes soft like she was doing me a favor. "Because you're not ready for a man like him. He needs someone who understands him, who truly sees him." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stared at the woman who raised me, who stole my wedding day, and didn't even flinch. And somewhere inside me, something shattered, but something else lit up too. Quiet, burning, not sadness, not shock, something colder, something strong. I wiped my tears, then I took the bouquet from her hand, turned and walked back into the church. Not to marry him, to end everything, my way. I zipped up my dress with hands that didn't tremble. Not anymore. The lace felt tighter than it had yesterday, like it was trying to hold me in to keep all the cracks from splitting open. My reflection in the mirror smiled back, serene, composed, unbothered, a stranger. But behind the calm eyes and gentle blush, something else had taken root. A cold, deliberate fire that didn't scream or cry. It waited. I stepped out into the bridal suite, where my bridesmaids were chattering nervously, clearly aware that something was off. They'd heard whispers. They'd seen how I hadn't looked at my mother once since she walked in, or how I'd brushed past Derek when he tried to hold my hand. But no one dared ask. No one wanted to touch whatever storm I was holding. "Back. You look breathtaking," one of them said, voice a little too bright. I tilted my head. "I feel like a dream," I whispered, and it wasn't a lie. The kind you have before waking in a sweat. The ceremony was set in a small stone church nestled in the hills just outside town, the kind of place built for lifelong promises and storybook photos. Candles flickered. Flowers lined the aisle. People stood when the music began, their faces turning toward me like I was still the girl they expected me to be. I walked slowly, each step deliberate, measured. I wasn't walking toward a future anymore. I was walking into a moment I would. Derek stood at the altar, nervous but smiling like nothing had happened. His tie was slightly crooked, like he hadn't slept. My mother sat in the front row, chin raised, eyes glassy, hands folded tightly in her lap. Not an ounce of guilt in sight. They both looked like actors waiting for their cues, and I was the director now. The priest began his opening words. I smiled and nodded at the appropriate times, my fingers resting lightly in Derek's. I could feel the tremor in his grip. Good. Let him wonder how much I knew. Let him sweat. When the vows started, I turned to him, holding his gaze. Derek, I began, from the moment we met, I believed in something beautiful. I believed in trust, in loyalty, in a love that could weather storms. I saw him exhale with relief. He thought I was forgiving him. Fool. But sometimes love teaches you more in its breaking than in its keeping. It shows you what people really are. There were subtle shifts in the crowd, murmurs, a flicker of panic in my mother's eyes. Derek's grip tightened slightly, but I didn't flinch. I will always remember the way you looked at me. I continued, and I'll always remember the way you didn't flinch when you destroyed something sacred. But today, I choose to remember myself. Derek blinked. What are you? I whispered, pressing a finger gently to his lips. The guests thought it was sweet. He knew better. The priest asked if I would take him as my husband. I do, I said, voice warm. But my eyes were frozen steel. The rest of the ceremony passed like a dream, not mine, someone else's. The kiss, the applause, the walk back down the aisle. We greeted guests, posed for photos. I played my part so well, even I almost believed it. At the reception, I floated. I made small talk with relatives, thanked everyone for coming, danced with my father. I laughed at jokes and twirled under the lights. But I was watching every look between Derek and my mother. Every awkward pause. Every moment she tried to reclaim the image of the perfect mother of the bride. Oh, she had no idea the stage was mine now. Derek leaned in during dinner, whispering, "You're being amazing after everything." I was scared you knew. I smiled, tilting my wine glass toward him. Is that what you were scared of? His eyes widened slightly. What do you mean? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His face drained of color just enough to satisfy me. Later, I found my mother alone near the garden path. She was pretending to admire the roses. I stood beside her, letting the silence stretch. I always dreamed of seeing you on your wedding day, she said, voice smooth, practiced. You looked radiant. I watched the wind play through the roses. It's funny. I always dreamed of my mother being proud of me, not jealous. She blinked. I turned to her inches from her face. Don't play dumb. You slept with him the night before my wedding. Her mouth parted slightly, but I didn't give her a chance to deny it. I just stepped back and smiled. You'll want to be ready when the speeches start. You won't want to miss what I say. Then I walked away. It was coming. Not today. Not yet. But when it did, they'd never forget it. I would make sure of that. The chapel was filled with soft violin music and the scent of white roses. Rose! Of friends and family sat upright, their heads turning as I walked down the aisle in a satin dress that felt heavier with every step. Not because of its weight, but because of what I carried inside me. Every footfall echoed in my chest, like a war drum. My heart didn't race. It thudded, steady, focused. I had rehearsed every line in my head for 3 days straight. Not a single stutter, not a single tear. This was not a wedding anymore. This was a reckoning. Ryan stood at the altar, looking. Every bit the charming man everyone thought he was. Smile wide. Practice cracked just slightly when our eyes met. I wondered if he knew. If my calm unnerved him. If my silence these last few days had stirred even an ounce of guilt. It's probably not. My mother sat in the front row, veil-like fascinator perched proudly on her head, like she hadn't just betrayed her daughter in the worst way imaginable. She looked thrilled, or maybe relieved, like she had won something. I had spent the last 48 hours memorizing the way she looked in the screenshots. The words she sent to my fiancé, the pictures, the timestamps, the disgusting emojis. The officiant cleared his throat and began his speech, but I didn't hear a word. My mind was a storm behind glass, quiet from the outside, violent within. Then came the moment. The question. The one little line that was supposed to bind us forever. Do you, Emily, take Ryan? I have something to say. I interrupted gently but firmly. The room shifted. A soft gasp. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward. Ryan chuckled nervously, probably expecting a joke, something cute and romantic. My mother tilted her head, slightly puzzled. I took a breath and turned to face the guests instead of Ryan. When I was a little girl, began, voice clear and steady, I used to dream about my wedding day. I imagined walking down the aisle towards someone who saw me, really saw me, and who would protect my heart like it was his own. The room quieted further. Even the children stopped fidgeting. I thought I found that person in Ryan. But 3 nights ago, I found something else. I reached into the bodice of my dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It trembled just slightly in my hands, not from fear, but from adrenaline. These are screenshots from Ryan's phone, messages between him and my mother. Texts that began months ago, texts that turned flirtatious. Then explicit, gasps erupted. My aunt audibly whispered, "What?" My cousin dropped her program. I wasn't going to share this. I thought about keeping it private, pretending nothing happened, but then I realized the silence protects the wrong people. And today I'm done protecting the wrong people. Ryan's smile had dropped. His mouth opened, then shut. His eyes darted to my mother, who was now frozen in her seat, her hand still resting delicately on her lap like she was clinging to some kind of dignity. They slept together, said now turning toward Ryan. The night before the rehearsal, dinner, while I was finalizing the seating chart, my fiancé and my mother were sneaking into a hotel suite. Someone in the third pew audibly gasped and said, "No way," under their breath. I read every word, I continued. The text said things like, "She'll never know," and I can't stop thinking about that night. My mother even wrote, "You're better than her in every way." The silence was thick now, heavy with disbelief, outrage, and something close to shame. Ryan's jaw twitched. My mother looked like a statue carved out of guilt and narcissism. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said, softening. "I'm here to free myself from a lie." I looked at Ryan, and for the first time I let him see the truth in my eyes. Not rage, not sorrow, but something scarier, detachment. I had already mourned him. He just didn't know it yet. "You're not the man I thought I loved. And Mom, you're not the woman I looked up to." My voice wavered slightly, but I held my ground. "I'm not saying I do today. I'm saying I'm done." And with that, I slipped the engagement ring off my finger and placed it gently on the altar. No drama, no hurling. Just finality. Then, without another word, I turned and walked back down the aisle. Alone, not a bride. But something better. A woman who chose herself over betrayal. No one moved. The violinist had stopped playing. Officiant stood in stunned silence. Father, bless his heart, started clapping slowly. 1, 2, 3. Others joined in, unsure whether it was appropriate, but sensing that something powerful had just happened. Outside the church doors, the sunlight felt brighter than it should have. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, I could actually feel the air in my lungs. Behind me, the church remained silent. Inside, 2 people had been exposed. But outside, 1 person had just been set free. The morning light didn't sting the way it used to. 6 months had passed since the wedding that never happened. 6 months since I stood in front of a room full of stunned faces, in a dress meant to start a new life, and ended a legacy instead. Like my mother, my fiancé. Gone. Both of them. Not just from my wedding, but from my world entirely. At first, the silence hurt. I kept expecting Ryan to call, to apologize again, to beg. But the last words I ever said to him, "You chose her," must have stuck, because he never reached out again. My mother tried. A dozen messages, then 20. Long ones, short ones. Angry, weepy, cold. I read none of them. I deleted them all. Had nothing left to say. No more scripts to play out. I packed 2 bags and booked a one-way flight. Somewhere quiet. A beach town with no memories attached. The first night, I couldn't sleep. The second, I cried until morning. Third, I finally heard something I hadn't in weeks. My own thoughts. And they were kinder than I remembered. I started therapy. First, I didn't think I needed it. I'm just getting over betrayal. I told the woman on the couch across from me. She didn't nod. She waited. And somehow that made me keep talking. Sessions turned into rituals. The more I talked, the less I hated myself for not seeing it coming. I started to believe the truth, that their betrayal didn't mean I was unlovable. It meant they were. Solo travel wasn't glamorous. I didn't post curated beach shots or fake smiling selfies. I wandered dusty streets, sat in cafes, watching strangers laugh. I bought myself flowers. I had long, slow dinners without checking my phone once. I stopped waiting for someone to come rescue me and realized no one needed to. I was already safe. Alone didn't mean lonely anymore. It meant free. I got invited to a friend's wedding. At first I said no. The idea of seeing vows, dresses, kisses, it all felt too close. But then I remembered the girl I used to be. The one who loved weddings. It's the one who believed in love. Even if the people around her used it like a weapon. I wanted to meet her. Again, the ceremony was held in a vineyard. The bride wore a gown that sparkled like water. Her father walked her down the aisle, his eyes misty, proud. For a second, I felt the ache creep back in, but it didn't stay long, because I wasn't comparing her moment to mine. I was just happy for her. Someone snapped a photo of me during the reception. I was laughing, genuinely, mouth open. Head back. When I saw it the next day, I didn't recognize myself at first. Not because I looked different, but because I looked light. The weight was gone. I saved the picture, not to post, just to remember. 2 days later, I received a letter. In the mail, no return address. But I knew that handwriting. My father. The man who had disappeared from my life when I was 7. I opened it with shaking hands. He apologized for leaving. Said my mother made his life unbearable. That she turned everything into a contest, even love. That he didn't know how to stay, without losing himself. But he'd followed my life from afar, seen photos, updates, heard through an old friend what had happened. He said he wasn't surprised, that my mother had a history of sabotage with him, with her own sister, even with me as a child. I read that letter 3 times. Then I cried. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I'd always suspected. I wasn't broken. I was a survivor of someone else's brokenness. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my journal. That night, I lit a candle. Not to mourn the past, but to honor the version of me that walked through fire and didn't turn to ashdot. I no longer needed revenge. I didn't need apologies or closure or even an explanation. I had rebuilt myself from the inside out, stronger, wiser, softer too, but with boundaries sharp enough to cut. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to be someone's daughter or someone's wife. I just wanted to be me. That was more than enough.